Hey everyone, you're gonna have to excuse my voice today. I'm gonna get through as much as I can, but been a little sick. I'm on the tail end of it, but yeah, you know how these things go. So currently, right now, like I'm feeling fine. It's just like a cough, and my voice sounds a little hoarse. All right, so where to start? Hey, how's it going, man? It's going great. Excited to be here. Hoping to have this be successful. But basically, anyone who's been around this channel for a while would know that I've been working on this course for like a year. And originally, it was going to be just like videos on the YouTube channel, but that takes a lot of resources from me. And I have multiple projects going at the moment in addition to a newborn baby. So if I'm being honest, like the to do this course that way would just take a lot of time that I don't have. So I was like, you know what? I've been promising this course for like a year now, and I got to get it out there. I mean, do I have to? No, but I guess I'm tired of talking about it. But I also think like by doing it as a live stream, maybe that allows people to ask questions. It could be a little bit more interactive. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. And if it totally sucks, and then I'll just redo it as videos in some future date. But I think the goal today was just to like get it out there, and so on. So this this just like talks a little bit about what would be in this course, right? Originally, I had it a lot more in here, like compacted, and I was like, I don't want to like overload people because this is supposed to be a beginner course, and I think the goal is like to give people a chance to like learn it over time. So I broke it out into two parts basically. And then of those two parts, like I'm not going to get through all this in today's stream, especially if I have to stop due to the voice going out. But essentially, part one is like just basic modeling, and then part two would go into more like character modeling, rigging, animation, those types of things. But overall, the point of the course is there's tons of Blender courses out there, right? I'm not going to sit here and say that this Blender course is the best one, um, but the problem I have with a lot of them is they're like how to use Blender for art, right? They're not how to use Blender for just game dev specifically. And then on top of that, um, the other problem I've seen with a lot of Blender courses is they're not really they 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 tend to get stuck on these like industry best practices, which in my opinion don't really add value. Um, I've been doing Blender just as long as Unreal Engine almost, and what I found is like a lot of times you waste time trying to make your models like fit this perfect mold. And I think it slows dev teams down a lot. And I think 3D artists could be a lot more efficient if they would like clear their mind of all of that best practice stuff and just focus on like making the models for the game. And you can argue with me that the models are better if you follow best practices. And I'm not going to disagree with you, but it's like that 90-10 rule or the 80-20 rule sometimes that people talk about. You can get to 80% of completion really quickly, but that last 20% takes a lot of time. And when you're a small team of indies that are doing this as a hobby or on like a very fixed budget, time is everything, right? So if I could make a model that's like pretty good in 3 hours, or a model that's like really, really, really good in 10 hours, do we really need to spend that extra invested time? Or is like pretty good enough, right? Especially as an indie team, right? We're not trying to make Skyrim here. We're not trying to make the next GTA. We're trying to make the next Hollow Knight or the next, what's the big one right now? There's this game that's like a ball pit or something. It's called Ball X Pit. This is like a simple indie game that people threw together, right? They're not going crazy, and people just don't care. I teach indie dev. I teach game dev for kids. Kids literally do not care how good your graphics are. It is so insignificant to them. So my idea is like, just make it good enough. Just make it good enough so you can get it out there. So, um, yeah, here's part two: sculpting, rigging, animating, rendering. All right. So here's what I'm going to cover in this course. If you're going to get through to part one, basics of 3D modeling using Blender. This is modeling, shading, UV mapping, texturing, rigging, animation. If we get to that, uh, the Blender is best when you use the hotkey workflows to maximize your efficiency. It's all hotkeys. Like people that don't know Blender and have come from another modeling software, they get like discouraged by this. But like it's all hotkeys, super super quick if you can learn the hotkey workflows. And then workflows for creating 3D assets in Blender for use in modern game engines. That's the ultimate goal, right? Course tips: keep the default keybinds. Don't change your keybinds. If you come from Maya or 3ds Max, you might be tempted to try to make Blender work like one of those softwares. It is not those softwares. Leave the keybinds and just force yourself to learn them. I promise you'll be better off. If you're worried about hardware, Blender is pretty lightweight. Like I used to use it for rendering 3D models for my day job, and the work computers they gave us were trash. But like it can run, it just gets slow. So middle mouse button comes in common. Like you need a middle mouse button for the most part. You need a mouse. I don't think you could effectively use Blender without a mouse. Get a keyboard with a number pad, meaning like the number keys over here. There's hotkeys assigned to those that are super, super helpful. And if I don't have a numpad, I'm almost like hamstrung in Blueprints. GPU, CPU are key. You want like a good balance of those two. Most gaming computers have both. RAM helps speed up some processes, specifically rendering. All right. And then this is actually just a general tip for any course, not just my course, any course. If you're trying to learn this for the first time, what I recommend is that you watch each portion of the video and take notes. So like I'll break it up into lessons, watch the whole lesson, take some notes, then go back and watch it a second time and try to follow along. By taking notes, you'll realize that you're actually like absorbing the information more quickly. And this is not just my course. This is like every Udemy course, Coursera course, YouTube course. Like use this and it will work. And then join the Discord if you're following this and you know my channel, you're probably already there. If you're new to the channel, the Discord is super helpful for all types of game dev stuff. This is like the first time we're doing anything with 3D modeling. Usually it's Unreal Engine stuff. So yeah. Course disclaimers. This is a beginner course. We will not cover advanced topics. This is not going to help you make AAA game dev assets. This is mostly like low poly stuff you could use in like some basic games. But the point is to build that foundation knowledge so then you can build onto it more. And this course focuses on making game ready models for use in game development. So we're not going to really cover areas of Blender that are not related to this, right? Blender can be used for like making 3D animations and all types of rendered art. Our goal is to make assets for game design. So actually, if you're not here for that, there's probably a better course for you, like 100%. Um, the workflows in this course are not always industry standard, but they work, so who cares? If you're not caring about the industry standard and you're just a small indie team trying to make stuff for your game, I think you'll learn that the stuff in this course is actually pretty good. All right, what else do we have? I thought there was one more slide. No, that must be the last one. Yeah, it was. All right. So I originally had all these slides, but I think people just get sick of the slides. So that's the last time we're going to use the slides. What we're actually going to be doing throughout this course is I've created this document. It's currently 51 pages. And we're going to be just going through this document. And in here, there's like step-by-step procedures for everything we're going to do. So what I'm going to do for this course, I'm just going to go through this document, and this is going to be the course. If you want, you can get the document on my Patreon, patreon.com. It's Jim Douglas Studios /shop, and it's here. I put it for $10. I think that's a reasonable price, but if you disagree, let me know and we can work something out. You can DM me in Discord. We can work something out. I don't want people to feel like you can't go through this course without the document. So if you DM me in Discord and you talk to me, I'll probably just give you the document. Like, I'm being honest. But if you want to support the channel and you want to help ensure that we can have like new content, then you can buy this. I will put a link in the chats. But again, I don't want someone to not go through this course because you can't get the document. I just give it to you. I don't really care. All right. This little disclaimer is basically like a lot of what I said. Tips for the course. All right, introduction to Blender. These video links will work once we get through these recordings. So the first thing we want to do is install Blender. I'm actually going to just move this document over so that we could focus on what's happening. Oh, this cough. I don't know how far I'm going to get. All right. So the first thing we need to do is go download Blender. Blender.org. Blender is a nonprofit. Blender is 100% free, first of all, which is one of the reasons I use this for this course. Not to mention, I know Blender pretty well, so it's the best opportunity for me to show you how to do 3D modeling, but it's also free. I know that there's some great software out there, but in my opinion, the software as a service model has just like gotten completely out of control, where software companies are charging like $50 to $100 per month to access something. And I know that that like creates opportunities for development, but how is this company Blender doing it and making like an industry competitive software completely free, open source to everyone? Just saying. So blender.org, do not be fooled by other websites. It is blender.org, and you just go to download, and they have the most current version up here, which is 4.5, which is looks like what we'll use. So I'll have to update the guide to say 4.5. So you just download Blender and then you install it. But I like to actually have the most updated version of the software. So you can actually get it on Steam. And the good thing about Steam is it'll automatically update it to the latest version. So this is how I like to do it. You can see all of the things in my library. Oh, I don't even have it installed on this computer. How embarrassing. What is installed on this computer? Oh, 4.3. All right, let's open that while that's installing. So if you're trying to follow along, go ahead and start downloading it and installing it. If you don't know how to install a software, um, I don't want to have to tell people how to do that. I feel like at this point, people probably should know how, right? Maybe that's wrong of me to assume that. But this is 4.3. We'll use this just for the first little bit until the other one gets done. So when you first, oh, it's already done. When you first open Blender, you're gonna get this splash screen. It's gonna show you like some of your recent files. You can open from here, recover last session. So like if Blender crashed, you're probably gonna want to click this because it'll use like a backup file. And then it has some various like presets for like different types of tasks. I always will just click general, and I can show you some of the other ones. But the thing about general is it has all of these ones in there. It's like a one size fits all type thing. But you can also set these up to be like customized too. So let's click general. And here is Blender. And there's our friend, the default cube. If you're on the Blender forums on Reddit, you'll realize this is like a meme because whenever people open Blender, they tend to just delete this thing right off the bat. But let's keep them in there for now while we discuss how to use Blender. So first, let me pull up my document. Oh, we're already through lesson 1, apparently. Lesson 1 was just installing Blender and opening it up. And then we talk a little bit about hotkeys. I'll go through them as we go through this course. Let's do this so I can see the chat still. Finally, Blender, yeah. I've been talking too much. Hey, how's it going, Mr. Enter the Hole? Sorry. What kind of hole? Yeah, still waking up. What time is it there? I think you're an hour behind me. Yeah, it's not bad. All right, so we can go a little bit through like the basics here of what we're looking at. But for the most part, you have some menus up here, standard stuff, open, new, save, import, export. We'll talk about this later in the course when we're exporting our assets, or if you need to import something, you know, standard stuff, quit, edit, standard stuff and edit, undo, redo, undo history, preferences, which is a big one. So by default, Blender has like a 50 undo limit, but you can increase that. You can do that in preferences. I don't remember exactly where it is. Could probably search for it. But yeah, preferences, you can make a lot of changes to the way things work. Add-ons, if you want to look for add-ons. Hang on a second. It's a line from Adventureland. Interesting. Enter the hole. Mr. Enter the hole. All right. Good to know. I'm going to trust you on that. If I Google that, I don't know. All right. The next one, render. This we'll talk about in the rendering video. Window. Just some stuff here. You can create workspaces, which are these. Help. The Blender manual is actually pretty solid. It's very searchable. There's a lot of like good stuff in here. And this also like kind of brings me to another thing. If you want to like really learn Blender and you're not sure where to like go for like really, really in-depth knowledge, what I would actually recommend is that you use the Blender, what's it called? Anyway, I'll find it. Maybe I'll talk about it in a bit. Oh, education. No. It used to be like right here. Anyway, there's like a Blender training that you can go through. It's not free, but you get it by donating to Blender, which it's a good way to give back to the community, to this software that's kind of helped so many people. All right, let's keep moving. All right, so the next thing is regions. This big one in the middle is the viewport, pretty common stuff. The way to navigate this is like kind of counterintuitive. So you might, if you're coming from Unreal or another software, you might intuitively right click. Right click is a menu, so we don't want to do that. Left click like does this selection tool, so we don't want that. It's actually middle mouse button. So if I hold middle mouse and I move my mouse, I can look around, but it's rotating based upon the point where my viewport is currently at. It doesn't like move around, and it's more of a rotation than a look. If I hold shift in middle mouse, I can kind of pan around. So the way you kind of get different views is by middle mouse kind of pan, but that's super annoying. If you want to look at something specific, it's going to take a while to like get to that thing, right? So a hotkey that we can use is on the numpad, the decimal point. It's not a period, it would be a decimal point, and that'll zoom in your view on an object. So like if I click this, it'll zoom on that. If I click this, it'll zoom on that. So this default has a few things. It has a cube, a light, which we'll talk about with lighting, which is more for rendering, and then a camera, which again is more for rendering. So we won't talk about those too much for a while. The outliner, similar to like any other software, this has a list of everything that's in your project. So if we create things, we can find them in here. One of the things that I love about Blender is you can create these collections. So I can just like create a new collection. We can rename it like models. And you can actually create like subfolders, which is a new-ish feature. When I started learning Blender, you couldn't do this, but now you can. So for those people that love to have like super organized files, you can do a lot of this collections. Another benefit of this is like everything's very droppable. Like I can now move my cube over here. I could call this one like scene render components, maybe render components, because we don't really need those if we're not rendering, and we can actually just like deselect and they're just not going to show at all. So this is really awesome when you have like a very complex model and it's like really hard to, you only want to work on one part of it. You can use these collections and you can just like hide the things that you're not using, which I find like super helpful. Now there's two other things over here. There's an eyeball and a camera. So these are toggleable, and these will tell you, can I see it in the viewport? And then will it show up when I'm rendering? So for things like the camera and lighting, if we're not like actively working on rendering, we can just hide those, but they'll still be useful when we render because the camera is on. But I'll just turn that off for now. Down here is the properties panel. Notice like a lot of, if you're using like Unreal Engine or Unity, this is like your details panel. Notice that the options change based upon what you have selected. So like here I can change my camera settings. Here I can change my lighting settings. And then with this one I have some options for changing the cube. We'll talk through what a lot of these do throughout the course. But for right now, there's a lot you can do here. I need like a mute hotkey. All right, let's go through the next thing. We'll get to rendering soon. We'll get to modeling soon, I promise. The viewport, like I said, hold middle mouse button to rotate, shift to kind of pan around. But there, the period will zoom in on an object. There's also some really good hotkeys with your numpad too, where if you, this is why I said you want a number pad on your keyboard, not just like the key numbers. So like these numbers do something. So 1 will give you a front orthographic view, 3 will give you a right orthographic view, and 7 will give you a top orthographic view. And then control will do the opposite. So control 1 is front, control 1 is back, 3 is right, control 3 is left, top, bottom. So those are super helpful. There's also 4, 8, 6, and 2 do like partial rotations. So if I'm looking at this and I just want to kind of like rotate around it, I can use 4 and 6, 8 and 2. 0 will give you a view of whatever your current camera is. So if I hit 0, it's going to show me this is what the camera sees. And then 5 changes it alternates between orthographic and perspective. If you don't know what orthographic is, let me just make a couple of these real quick. All right. So this, let's move this one like way back here. Now we have like some perspective, right? But if I hit 5, it's like orthographic. There's no perspective. This may look weird, but honestly, it's super helpful sometimes, especially when you have objects that are varying sizes. It allows you to get a size comparison because there's no perspective. Um, so it does come in handy. Let's delete those. All right. And then there are some basic like viewport options, and they all have their purpose. Up here in the top, there's these buttons, and I'll just show you what they do. Currently, we're on the what's this one called? Solid. There's wireframe, which just shows me a wireframe of my model. There's my computer's frozen. Yep, great. Really great timing. There we go. Viewport shading. We'll talk more about this when we talk about shading. And then rendered. This shows you what the camera sees, like the view of the camera. It's also kind of a representation of how the model will look in your game engine. Kind of. I say that because each game engine renders things differently, and Blender renders things differently than game engines. But it's kind of a representation. Just keep in mind there's a lot of variables like lighting, other things, right? But it gives you a pretty good idea of how it's going to look in your game engine. You have like post-processing, like there's a million things that could change how something looks. All right. So there's also a toolbar. We can open, it's over here. We can toggle that on or off with T. The hotkey there is T. And this just gives us some tools. This 3D cursor thing is actually kind of relevant. We'll talk about that. We can also access these tools to change our current model. These are similar to the ones in your game engine of choice. So move allows us to move our model. Rotate allows us to rotate our model. Scale, you got it. Scale it up. And then this multi-tool, which does all three. Personally, and then your selection tool, which is also important. Personally, this is our hotkey model. Is each of these has a hotkey, and I don't ever use these because I just use the hotkeys. So the hotkey for move is G. If I press G, I can move this model around, and then when I left click, this is now where that model lives. I can rotate with R. That one's actually pretty intuitive. Move isn't intuitive, it's G. But I think it's because they wanted to keep them like close to where your hand would be on the keyboard, and G's kind of like right there. So, like I said, the hotkey model of Blender is going to drastically improve your speed. S is for scale, so we can scale it up and down. Now, there are also additional hotkeys to each of those, and you can restrict the number of axes that are used while you're using those tools. So if I press G to move and then X, I'm restricting my movement to the X axis. So if I want to move this along Y, G, Y, and now I can move my cube. Alternately, we can do G Shift X, and now I can move it on everything but the X axis. Similarly, G Shift Z, move it on everything but the Z axis. These are very helpful, I promise you, especially like with scaling. So let's say I wanted to scale this model, but I want it to stay the same height. I want it to like expand out. I can do scale, Shift Z, and now I'm just scaling it in those axes of X and Y. So I can make like a little platform, right? Control Z, undo, right? Pretty common. All right. Or scale Y, and I can just scale it on the Y axis. Rotate Y, and I'm just rotating on the Y axis, right? Very, very helpful. Yeah, exactly. So G, Y, yeah. Great. All right. There's also another, so this is the toolbar, and T toggles that. There's also another bar that's hidden by default, but N toggles that. And this is your sidebar. And this gives you information about your model, the current tool that you have that you're using, and then like your 3D cursor stuff down here. But this is really helpful if you want to make like a hard movement of something. So if I want to move this exactly 2 meters along the X axis, I can do that. Or if I want to scale it exactly 2 times on the Y axis, or sorry, scale, I can do that. Or rotate exactly 45 degrees on the Z. Also, like if you're in an operation, like if I do GZ and I'm moving it on the Z axis, I can now type 10, enter, and it moved it 10. So you can do that like in the middle. Like if you kind of figure out, I want to get it about this amount, but I don't know quite where it is. Like let's say I'm moving it up on the Z, and notice I can watch those values updating in real time. And I'm like, it's about 2. That's about where I want it. Now I can just type 2, enter, and it'll just do that. So that's really helpful. Like I said, we're going to cover a lot of other stuff. So, but these are the basics for now. The properties panel, we'll just go through a few of these. We're going to cover a lot of them throughout the course, but I'll just give you an overview. So this is the rendering panel. This is settings for rendering. We'll cover this a lot more when we're doing the rendering lesson. This is your output. This is when we're outputting a render, not exporting. That's different. This is like when we're creating a render, or we're creating an animation that's rendered. This is for that. So we don't really use this much in this course, but this is here. It's more like if you're using Blender for art. Layers, we will not use this at all. There's a lot here. Honestly, I don't really use this, like completely honest. But again, I think a lot of this is if you're doing it for art, which I rarely use Blender for. Scene properties. This is again a lot of rendering stuff, right? World properties, rendering. Now this is some properties of the current object that I have selected. So this will come in handy from time to time. There are some things that you can only get through in here, like whether something is visible. Um, there's a couple other things. But notice, like, if we change objects, this changes as well. All right. Next one is modifiers. We actually have a whole lesson just on modifiers, so we'll talk about what those are. Particle effects, we're not going to use it in this course, but this can be used for things like hair, or like if you wanted to have some VFX in Blender, you would use them for this. What I would typically recommend for this stuff is use your game engine's VFX, because I actually don't know if these would export, I'm being honest. So we won't use it in this course, but if you wanted to do like hair, you could use a particle to create like hair. I would not recommend that for game dev, because it's going to create every hair as like a 3D model. You can use this though for things like a hair, what do they call it, card, where it's like a plane and then you color it to look like hair, but it's actually just like a bunch of planes stacked on top of each other. Or leaves, you would like draw a leaf and then you have a bunch of squares in your model that each of those like just renders the leaf. Physics, we will not be using this in this course, but it does have some pretty cool physics stuff. The fluid is pretty fun. The cloth does come in handy if you're doing like cloth clothing on a character model, but it's not perfect for exporting to your game engine. It would still take some work, if I'm being honest. Constraints, we will not use this in this course. This is for like if you were going to create some mechanical models and you wanted them animated, and you don't want to have to animate like every little part of the machine, like hydraulics, for instance. Let's say like there's a hydraulic on my robotic arm and I want that to like move like it would on a real robot, but I don't want to have to like control all of that. You can use constraints. We're not going to use it in this course. Data properties, there are some things in here that we'll use. Specifically, I don't know right now. Yeah, I would say that this is kind of more advanced stuff. We won't really use it that much. And then material, we'll use this a lot when we talk about the shading and materials. So that's what that does. Down here at the bottom, there's like this is for animations. This is like a timeline. We're not going to do animations. Oh my god. Oh, I don't know how long I'm going to make it, guys. We're not going to use animations for a while. So the reason I bring this up though is all of these are editable. You can change your viewport. So if we're not using this, we can change this to be something else, like a shader editor, or you can just get rid of it. So I can say join down, and now I just don't have that. We didn't talk about these. These are the workspaces. So this is the layout one. This is where most people do their work. It's kind of like a catch-all, but ideally, I think it's used for like rendering. Um, Modeling, it gives you a layout that's like more suitable for modeling. Sculpting gives you some tools for sculpting. UV editing, we'll talk about this when we talk about UVs. Texture painting, we'll talk about, I think we actually do a texture painting lesson. Shading, we'll talk about this when we do our shading lesson. Animation, rendering, we won't talk to till later. And then there's other ones. Geometry nodes is actually like super interesting. We don't cover it in this course. It's definitely, I would say, more advanced, but this is pretty cool for like procedural modeling. If you wanted to do like, hey, we need like 100 buildings for this downtown area, and we don't want to have to model every building individually. You can set up like procedurally model those buildings. I saw there's a guy, he's actually pretty amazing with this stuff. My only feedback for him is that it's not beginner accessible, but he does some pretty cool stuff. Like he had one that it was a he made a cathedral like 100% 3D procedurally modeled, which is just insane. But it was really cool and it looked really good. So all this stuff is there. My only thing that I would say, other than this, is like a little bit more advanced, is the procedural modeling may not be optimized for game dev. So I would do some research on this. You might actually be better off doing your procedural stuff right in your game engine, but I'm not an expert on that. Compositing, this is for like rendering stuff. And then scripting, like I said, Blender is 100% open source. You can write scripts. You can change the way it works any way you want. We won't cover that in this course, but if you know Python, the whole thing is written in Python, so you can do your own stuff. All right. I think that's the boring stuff. Just going through this real quick. Yep, I think I covered all the basics. So the next thing we're going to do is start modeling. All right, so here we have our cube. Let's see if we want to keep that. I'm going to go ahead. All right, so like anything 3D, there are 3 axes in Blender. They're annotated by red for X, Y for green, and Z, blue for Z. X, like if you think about Blender though, where this may be different if you're using Unreal Engine or even Unity, because Unity is completely different. If you're coming from Unreal Engine, the concept in X and Y are kind of flipped in Blender, because Y is considered front to back and X is left to right, whereas in Unreal Engine I think the idea is they're switched. So just be knowledgeable of that. Like if you're trying to rotate, if this was like a face or something and we want it to like turn its neck, we want to rotate it on Z, right? Z would be like, no, we're not going that way. If we wanted to like shake our head, yes, we would want to rotate on X. Yes, we will go that way. All right. Like I said, there's the views. 1 is front, 3 is right, 7 is top, 5 alternates between perspective and orthographic. Those are our views. There's also an X-ray view, which you're going to use probably a lot, but there's a little button up here, toggle X-ray, and the hotkey for this is Alt-Z. Warning, if you have like an NVIDIA graphics card, Alt Z might be used as a hotkey for one of their NVIDIA things. So you have to change it there. I wouldn't change it here. Change it there because you probably don't use it for NVIDIA. It's like something about their streaming app. So we already talked about movement, but we'll do it again here. G will move, and we can restrict that to an axis by pressing the hotkey for that. R for rotate, intuitive. S for scale, intuitive. G is the only one that's not intuitive there. All right. So also notice this little orange dot. This is considered the origin of this object. So when we scale and rotate, we're rotating on that origin. Just really quickly, I'll demonstrate that we can change the origin of an object by there's a variety of ways, right? But we can let's say, for instance, I moved the top of this up. And now the origin of my object is down here. So when I rotate, it's going to rotate on that still. But let's say I wanted it to still rotate from the middle of the object, so it kind of like twists in a more normal way. I can right click and say set origin to geometry. And now it rotates from that point. This is actually really helpful for if you're doing, if you are, in most cases, I'll start here. In most cases, you actually want this origin to be like where the floor is. If I'm being honest, I think that makes the most sense. For instance, let's set the origin of this box to the bottom. And I can do that by moving this 3D cursor. So if I hold Shift S, it brings up this menu. And I can say cursor to selected. And because I have this bottom face selected, it moved the cursor there. So I can show you, I can move it up here. I can just highlight this one point. And now the cursor is up there. So I'll highlight this bottom face, cursor to selected. And now I can set my origin to the 3D cursor. And now when I rotate it, it's going to rotate on the from the bottom. This is really helpful when you are putting like 3D models in a scene. Let's say I have a table and I put it on the floor and then I want to move it around in my game engine, but then I want to scale it. It should scale like from the floor, right? If I scale it from the middle of the table, then now the legs are going to kind of like go through the floor, and then I have to like move it up again. It's going to be super annoying. Also, when you place things in Unreal Engine or Unity, those game engines consider this like the focal point. They consider it it's the origin of the object there as well. So you want to make sure you set it in your game in Blender so the game engine can use it. Also notice now, like if I scale this whole object, it's scaling like not under the floor, it's scaling from that point. If I rotate it, it's rotating from the floor. This is really helpful for like things like doors. Like let's scale X. Let's make this really thin. And let's pretend it's a door. All right. A door should rotate from its hinge, which is probably going to be on the side. It'd be weird for a door to rotate like this, right? So what I can actually do is I can set the origin to this point. And now when I rotate, it moves like a door would. So if I export this to Unreal Engine or Unity, it's gonna, those game engines are gonna consider that as the origin point. Notice I'm moving this origin point around. If you ever want to like get it back to where it's supposed to go, you can hit Shift C. That moves the origin back to its point and it reframes the scene. So it's going to like put everything back in the viewport. Oh my gosh, I'm really sorry. I actually considered canceling this stream today because of this cough, but I was like, it's been so long. All right. Another thing with that menu, Shift S, is there's another option there to move the selection to the cursor. So before we use cursor to selected, which move the cursor to wherever our point was, we can also do selection to cursor, and then that will snap whatever we have selected to the cursor. This is helpful. Let's say I had 2 of these doors and I wanted, just randomly, I wanted this door to align with this point. So I can select that on this object, move my cursor there, and then I can snap this one to that point. So now they are like exactly lined up. I don't know a practical example for this one specifically, but that's a good way to like snap them to each other. All right. So I've also been toggling between edit mode. So to do that, I'm going to select an object. I'm going to hit tab. And notice in here, I can select portions of the mesh. And up here, there's like 3 options. Select mode. This is vertice, so I can select just a point on my object. This is line, so I can select just a line on my object. This is face, so I can select whole faces. And to toggle that, I hit tab. Hello, Kurt Cobain. And then I can use that to edit different portions of my object. So let's say I wanted to make this door shorter. I can just select the top face and then move that down with GZ. And now I have like a short little door. All right, so let's say now that's weird. We just need it to be more square. We can GY on this face. And now we have like a little bit of a square door. If you wanted to get it exact, you could use these tools over here. So it's 4 on the Y and 4 on the Z. And then 0.5. And there we have a square door. All right. You can also use these to scale it differently. So this is object mode where we can select objects, tab mode, tab to get into edit mode to edit your object. There's also sculpt mode, which you use for sculpting, vertex paint, weight paint, texture paint. We'll use these at different points of the course. But yeah, those are other modes. But for the most part, you're going to be using object and edit modes. All right, now for some fun stuff. Hi, why don't I use Maya? Because Maya is not free, and my course is meant to help people learn using free resources. Because not everyone has a lot of resources. And Blender's pretty awesome. I've personally never used Maya, but I've gotten in many an internet fight with people. And the only reason people use Maya is because that's what they learned in college, for the most part. People tend to stick to what they know. If you learn something and you get good at that, it's called the cost to convert. It's that's the product term of it. Like if I create a new game engine, I have to convince everyone to use my game engine, and even if it's better, there's a cost to convert of that company, and they may just say like, yeah, it's better, but it's going to cost us too much to change over. Yeah, there's tons of 3ds Max, Maya, probably the two bigger ones, Cinema 4D, you're saying. I just don't think that there's any reason to pay for software for 3D modeling when Blender can do so much. That's my personal opinion, but it just seems crazy that people would pay for Maya or 3ds Max when you could just use this for free. All right, especially as a small team, because money is tight when you're an indie dev. All right, so I deleted that cube because we kind of made it all wonky. But what we can actually do is generate meshes, primitive meshes, into our scene. And we do that by pressing Shift A, brings up the menu. There's also this add up here, which is the same thing. If you're not, I would just recommend you learn Shift A. And we can see mesh. There's a few of them here: plane, cube, circle, two different types of spheres: cylinder, cone, torus, which is like a donut. And then monkey, which is this monkey. So yeah, you can add a bunch of different things. I'll show you what the two different spheres are because it's actually kind of relevant. Notice this one. If you've ever like looked at a globe, you have like longitude and latitude, right? So this creates a sphere in that manner. I'm going to move this one out of the way. And then I'll add one of the other ones. This is a ICO sphere. This one kind of looks like a dice, right? So there are benefits to both, and there are situations where you'd want one over the other. But basically, the problem with this one is if you're painting on it, same with like if you try to make a map of the globe and then you try to put that on the Earth, it's going to get weird, right? Alaska gets way too big. Canada looks giant. So this one is better for a better way to like break out the points when you're trying to paint them. Oh, yeah, good question. One second. We'll talk about the painting in one of the future lessons, though. But there are benefits to both, and there are times when you use one or the other. I also want to show when we Shift A, there's a menu that is down here now, and we can open that up, And notice that we can add or remove complexity from our object. This only exists once. As soon as I click away, that model is in my scene and I can't access it again. So the reason I bring that up is it's really important. And this is with any of them, right? So cylinder, I can create additional like bands on my cylinder and make it just 3 or a lot, right? For most cases, like 32 or 64 is going to be good. Unless this thing's like pretty giant, you're not really going to see these bands. You can also set the radius and depth. And you can set how is the top created. I actually think like this one just creates one solid top. Yeah, F9. You can bring it back. That is true. So I can click away. F9. Anyway. Maybe that's not what it is. But the point is, if I start changing this, I can't like add more. If I realize like, oh, I needed more detail on the sides, I can't add it. Not in an easy way. So the point is to like kind of understand what level of detail you need before you start working like more in your model. All right. Now the question. There was someone that's saying they're following my Unreal Engine course and they want to know where they should start. It's on Game Development Basics, Week 1, Lesson 3. That is where you are on the right path. That's exactly where I would tell someone to go. So I do have 2 Unreal Engine courses. They're both free. They're on my YouTube. One of them is a few years old. It's called Game Development Basics. I think it's a pretty solid course, at least up until week 5. Most people start to lose interest around week 5, and I think it's because I made week 5 too hard. So I was trying to have this like ramp up, right? Week 1 is pretty much anyone could do it. Like I could have my daughter go through it, and she's only 11. But as you get further in the course, I wanted it to get harder to challenge you to like learn new things. The ramp between week 4 and 5, I think I ramped up a little bit too quick. So I think people get discouraged in week 5, and I've noticed from the view counts, they start to drop out. That also could just be people get bored of it after week 4. I don't know. I also have Game Development Bootcamp, which I released a couple summers ago. This was an experiment to try to do the course as a live stream, and I learned a lot in that experiment. And I think if I were to do it again, I would do some things differently. The biggest complaint that I get about Game Development Bootcamp is it goes too fast. It's like too quick. So it's a little bit more like boot campy, I guess, which is the point. But I think I maybe made it a little bit too compressed. So if I were to do it again, it was an 8-week. I'd probably do like a 10 or 12 weeks of the same amount of content. But yeah, Game Development Basics is where I would say to start. Go through week 4, and then if you get to week 5 and you start to struggle, then it might be a good time to switch and go to try the other course. Yeah, that's another thing. The course Game Development Basics is kind of old. In the world of software, 2 years is like a lifetime. So it uses Unreal Engine 5.0, which was right after Unreal Engine 5 launched. Now we're in 5.6, almost 5.7. So the software has changed quite a bit over the last 2 years. And if you try to go through the course with 5.6 or 5.7, you're going to get stuck. So I recommend that people use 5.0 to go through the course, and then you can use any of the other ones that you want. But the information is the same. It's just the way the software works has changed. Yeah, if you're using 5.7, you're going to get stuck. I'm just going to tell you right now. It's fine. You can go to my Discord. You can ask questions. But enough has changed. When it was like 5.3, 5.4, I was like, yeah, it's probably not that big of a deal. But at this point, enough has changed that you're going to get stuck. All right. So we talked about everything. So now we're going to do our first exercise. And if you are using the guide, where we've gotten through the first 17 pages. So we're going to make our first 3D model, which is going to be a sword. Oh, thanks. Ask all the questions you want, man. There's only like 7 people here. I'm sure they don't mind. So let's delete all this. All right, so we're gonna make a sword. I'm gonna try to follow along the guide as much as possible. But essentially, the first thing we want to do, let's start with a cube. So I'm gonna hit Shift A. I'm gonna add a cube to my scene. All right, and this is not a sword, right? So I think the first thing I want to do is I want to scale the whole thing down, because this is 2 meters. If I put this in my game, this is going to be like as big as the character. So I'm going to scale the whole thing down to 0.1, and I can click here and drag down to, and then I can just change all 3 axes. So now my sword is much smaller, or my cube. It's not a sword yet. So if we think about a sword, I'll like kind of hover over it. We want the blade to come out this way, right? We want maybe like some hand guards on the x-axis, and then we want the handle down here, right? So I think the easiest place to start is by making, if we were to do this all as one mesh, let's make the hand guards. So I can actually scale just on the x-axis, and I want to scale it about 5 times. So I can type 5, and it will scale it 5 times whatever it was. And I can show that by showing that now on the x-axis we're 0.5 meters. Just probably still way too big, but we'll go with it. Oh, that's funny. I said the same thing in the guide. All right. Oh, this is the handle. Oh, so let's go back. I want to make sure I try to follow the guide. So let's scale on the Y 5 times. So this is the handle, right? Also notice that my origin point is right in the middle of the handle, which means this is going to be great for putting it into a game engine, because when I attach this to a hand, I can use the bone of the hand, and it's going to take that origin point and put it right in the middle of the person's hand. So this would mean I don't have to like figure out how to move it after. It's going to just snap to that point. So this is something you want to keep in thought. Now remember, we can always change that origin point, but like when you take a model and put it into your game engine, what is the use? And you want to make sure that you have that origin point in the right point. I don't understand your question, but I'll read it. All right. You hate Blender. Good for you. That's fine. I'm not here to convince people. Like, if you don't want to use Blender, that's fine. It's free. I don't know why someone would pay money for a software when Blender's free. But to each their own, right? I learned on Blender. I actually learned by following Blender Guru's donut tutorial, and I've just been like, this is great. This is all I would ever want. It can do everything I want. I don't know why anyone would use any other software, but I get it. Well, I don't get it, but I'm also not here to try to convince people. I'm here to make a Blender course. Um, can you make a video about to make it more simple? I'm very bad at C programming and not good in programming. Um, in my opinion, game development basics, and this is not just my opinion, the feedback that I've gotten over the years about this course has been overwhelmingly positive. And the feedback that I've gotten is that game development basics breaks down Unreal Engine in a way that makes it very easy to understand. So if you're still struggling, even with that course, there's a couple different options. The first one, you could try a different course, obviously. I think you may end up in the same boat, though. I think some people do better with like a private lesson because then you can ask questions. Like if you're getting stuck on my course, maybe there's just something that I'm not really explaining in a way that you personally can understand. Um, Everyone learns differently. Everyone has a different way of like absorbing new information, and my course may not work for everyone's learning style. So you may want to try to find like a personal mentor that can help you. You can ask questions and maybe they could figure out a way to help you personally absorb the information. I've had a lot of people that I've mentored that this is exactly what I do. They'll go through one of my lessons, then we'll talk about what they're struggling with from that lesson. Um, yeah, the whole course is about blueprints. The whole course is blueprints. There's no C++ in game development basics. It's 100% blueprints. Game development boot camp does do some C++, but towards the end. But yeah, if you get a personal mentor, like a private tutor, and you're still struggling with it, some people just don't have, like their brain doesn't work in a way that you can absorb that information. And if you're just not good at programming and you don't really like it, there's other jobs in game dev that you can do that aren't programmers. Game design is a great career path to still be like heavily involved in the process of creating the games, but you're not the one like writing the code, right? My friend is helping me with game, but he actually sucks at modeling any video guide tips. Yeah, this whole course is what I'm doing right now is a Blender course to teach 3D modeling for game dev. So we started like an hour ago. Oh my God, hour and a half. I gotta hurry up. All right, so we have our handle. The next thing we want is the part that blocks the hands, right? So I can actually extrude from this point by using E. And notice I'm adding to this geometry. So up to this point, we only had a cube, but now I'm actually going to add on to this cube. So if I hit E, and then I can pull out, and what I actually want is it to be about 0.1, because I want it to be the same distance out from here as the width and height. So I could type 0.1, and now that's exactly 0.1 away from the previous point. And then I can, with this face, I can scale this, but only on the x-axis by hitting X. So I hit S and then X. And then I want this to be about 3 times the width, right? So I'll hit 3, enter, and we have the startings of a sword. Not quite, but we're getting there. All right. Now I want the blade to come out of this surface. So I can hit I to inset. And notice that I'm creating a new face on this that's smaller. So I can, I don't know, that looks like about what a blade should be. Right? And then I can extrude this. Let's do like 1.5. That might be a little long. We can always change it later. So now it's starting to look like a sword. I mean, it's not a sword yet, but it's starting to look like a sword. The best way you can make it look like a sword is by bringing this to a point at the end, right? Hey, I'm happy to help, Kurt. Kurt Cobain. Never heard that name before. I'm just kidding. I'm old enough to remember when he died. All right, so let's bring it to a point. So I'm going to extrude out a little bit again. Let's do like 0.1 again. How about 0.2? And I want to bring this side and this side together. So I can use my scale tools, but I can restrict it to an axis. So what I'll do is I'll hit S to scale and then X. So I'm only scaling on the x-axis. And then like with everything else, I was able to like push buttons to get it like to snap to a point, right? Up in the top left, notice like as I'm scaling, there's this number that's like showing me. And when it gets to about 0, that's when the points are like kind of touching. So what I want is to scale it to 0. So I'm just going to hit 0, enter. And now those points are like exactly lined up. Now, there is a bit, this is going to cause a little controversy to anyone who has learned the industry standard way of doing things. We actually have like 4 points here now. Let's turn on these statistics. If you go to this little thing here, overlays, statistics, and it gives you some information about your model. So if I do this, there's still 4 points there, but we don't want 4 points there necessarily. So what we can actually do is these 2 points are at exactly the same space, but they still are 2 different things. So what I can do is highlight both of them and hit M for merge. This is the merge menu, and then merge by distance, and it's going to get rid of one of those points. So now that there's only 1 at each of those. Now, what we've done is we've created a triangle. And this, people don't like triangles. There's this idea in 3D modeling that everything should be a plane. Everything should have 4 points. And there's a reason for that, but I would say it's not always true. There are times when it's not relevant. There are times when it doesn't really matter. And this is the first area of controversy for this course, where I would say at the tip of this sword, it doesn't really matter because of what we're using this sword for in our game. The time, let me actually talk about something else first. When you import a model into a game engine, it's going to make everything triangles. So it's going to take this plane and it's going to find a way to make this into 2 triangles. It's going to take this plane and it's going to find a way to make this into 2 triangles. There's a term for this, but I can't remember it. So your game engine is going to make this a triangle anyway. So what's the reason to not just make it a triangle? Well, there does come issues with when something is animated or specifically rigged, that we'll talk about this later, but rigging like creates bones to your model so that it moves like a human or like a creature would, right? And when you have triangles or n-gons meaning like more than 4 points, like the way that gets stretched doesn't work well for rigging. So when you're having something rigged, you want to have as few triangles and n-gons as possible, because you want to make sure that your rig moves the model correctly. Or if you are going to have triangles, you want to put them in areas where like the player can't really see them, like armpits or like between the legs, right? Or areas of your model where like stretching isn't really going to be seen as much. But for something like a sword, we're not going to be bending the sword. It's like a solid object. So my argument is it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. All right. So the next thing, we kind of like have a sword now, but it looks like a kid's sword that they would make like out of scraps of wood, right? We want to make it like more pointy. All right. So the next thing we can do is something called a loop cut. And I'm going to show you, it's Control R is the hotkey. And if I move my mouse around, it's showing me like I can add additional loops to the geometry of this sword. But notice when I go to this one, this would like draw a line right down the middle of my sword. It doesn't go to the tip of the sword. And this is because we created a triangle. So this is another reason you want quads or planes, is because your loop cuts can't cut through a triangle. It doesn't know how to do it because it needs 4 points to know how to slice down the middle. If it's only 3 points, it doesn't know how to slice down the middle of that. So let's put a loop cut here. Let me show that again. So I'm going to hit Control R and I'm going to left click, and now it's saying where do you want to put that loop cut in the model, and I can like have it be off to one side. Like if I wanted only one sharp edge on this sword and the other side's like a blunt, I could put it over here. But for our sword, we want 2 sharp edges. So if I hit escape, it's going to put it right in the middle. One more thing about loop cuts, we can, when we're here, we can actually scroll our mouse wheel and we can add like more loop cuts. But we just want one, and we want it in the middle. We are going to have an issue now where this point is not connected to the tip. So we can just select both those points and hit J, and we would join them. And there we go. And then we want to sharpen this blade, right? We want to make it look sharp. But we still want to kind of maintain this like area where it kind of meets the blade. Like if you're going to sharpen the blade, you're not going to sharpen it all the way to the end. I'm going to do another loop cut. And this one, I want to go this way. I'm going to click, left click, and I'm going to slide it down till it's like a reasonable distance from the handguard, right? Because now I want to sharpen my blade. I want to make it like look nice and sharp. So let's do one more loop cut, and we'll go this way. Escape to make it right in the middle. And let's just show that we can use that merge tool again. So we can select all three of these. We can hit M to merge, and we can, there's more than just merge by distance, right? There's merge at center, merge at cursor, merge at first or lapse. Let's do merge at center. And now notice that those 3 points are all 1 point, right? So that's that one. Let's do this one now. All right, look at that. We got a sharp sword now. All right, the blade is looking good. So let's do the handle now. So to do the handle, we can do Control R, and I want to add a loop cut, but I want to have like a bunch of loop cuts. So let's start with 4. And again, this is just scrolling the mouse wheel. And then I'm going to use this to like shape the handle, but I also want one like kind of here, and then one kind of here. All right, so now I want to kind of scale some of these down. So I'm just going to select the 4 corners, and my goal is to make this like look more round, like a handle, right? So I'm going to select these. I'm going to scale, and notice that now that's starting to like take the shape of like a round handle, right? So I can do these ones now. Scale. But like a sword handle is going to be like a little bit fatter in the middle, right? That's how it like is ergonomic. So I can also grab like a whole loop of them like this and scale that. But you can also hold Alt and click a point or a line and it will automatically select the loop. So like, look at this one, it's selecting like the whole loop, right? So it's called like a loop select. So holding Alt, select this, and now I can scale this one out, or I think actually it's better to scale this one in, this one in. And now kind of looks like a little handle, right? All right. So last part for this sword is like a little hand guard. So what I can do is I can use face view. I'll select these four, and I'm going to hit E to extrude, but notice like that's not really what I want. So I can hit escape. Those points that I extruded still exist. So now I can scale them on the x-axis, and notice like now I have those points. But that's, I mean, maybe that's what you want, right? But I think it would look better if these like kind of just were in the same geometry as the rest of it. So I'm just going to select one side and hit scale x 0. And now all of those points are on the same scale on the x-axis. It means they're at the same point in the x-axis. So I could do that for this side too. Scale x 0. And then I can grab all four of those again and just scale, but shift X to not scale on the x-axis. Just scale them in a little bit. And we're looking like a sword. So the last thing that I want to talk about is like, see how these, we can kind of see the ridges. For low poly, that's probably fine. If we're doing like a low poly game, I would say this sword's probably complete. But we can also add more to it. And I'm just going to show you a couple things. There's, when we right click, there's this smoothing. There's shade flat, which is what we have. There's shade smooth, which is going to try to like shade it as if it's like a smoothed object. And then there's shade auto smooth. What shade auto smooth does is it's going to say like, it's kind of like a middle ground. For instance, these planes should clearly be flat, right? They shouldn't be shaded like they're a smooth object. But the handle, maybe we do want it shaded like a smooth object. So notice like it's kind of done a little bit of both. The handle is kind of round looking, but the blade and the rest are not round looking. And we can find this in modifiers, the smooth by angle. And we can actually change the angle at which it considers an angle smooth versus flat. So if we pump this up, eventually it's going to start smoothing out more of the model. I'm going to leave it at 30. What we actually probably want to do is move some of these points in more so they hit that threshold. Yeah, that's a little better. Newer versions of Blender use a modifier for shade auto smooth. Yeah, that's what this is. Yeah, oh, you're saying the older versions don't. Yeah, or maybe they did. Yeah, it used to be, let's see if I can find it. It might not even be in here. It used to be one of these. It's not even, it's probably not even there anymore because they moved it. But yeah, it used to be an option in this data. but now it's a modifier. I learned on Blender 2, no, couldn't have been that long ago. I don't remember. Whatever one came out at the beginning of COVID, learning Blender was my COVID hobby to keep me from going crazy. All right, so this sword is like kind of done, but we could obviously add more to it if we wanted to. As we learn more tools, we'll realize that this sword kind of sucks. But at this point of the course, the point isn't to make like a fully game ready object. It's just to like get something so we can learn the different tools. So for this one, we pretty much learned some of the basic modeling tools. We learned a lot of the key binds that you're going to be using a lot. Moving, rotating, extruding, insetting, how to select a loop. What are the other ones we learned? Merging. So we've got like a good portion of the basic modeling knowledge done. We're going to continue to build upon that. There's one more thing in this lesson. All right, there's a couple more things. The first thing, if we notice, like these numbers are about the dimension. This sword should not be 2.3 meters on the y-axis, right? That's a sword that's as bigger than a person. That's like a size of a basketball player. I'm an American, but that's like 7 feet-ish, I think. We don't use meters because we're archaic. So we can scale this down. I don't know. What's a sword? Like 1.5 meters? Maybe shorter. 1.2. I don't know. I'm not a sword expert, but that feels like more. Like 1.2 meters is like about 4 feet. That feels like about how big a one-handed sword should be. And we can also set the scale. So there may be some weird things when you were to move this to a game engine where the scaling is going to be like super weird. So if we hit Control A, we'll bring up this apply submenu. And I like to just do rotation and scale. And notice when I did that, now my scales all went to 1, which meant this is now considering this size of my model is the actual size. So if I make it scale 2, this is twice the size it should be. So that's something that I like to do when I finish up a model. We also want to save it. So File, Save As. Where can we put this? I'll put it on my desktop for now. Sword.blend. And now I have my sword. There's one other point that I make if you're following along with the guide, and that's about normals. So normals are actually kind of hard for me to put in words, but basically when we're making a 3D model in Blender, it's not actually a solid thing. If you're using like a CAD software or some of the other softwares, it considers everything like if you're modeling it out of clay or wood or metal, right? But in the world of 3D modeling, it's considering that this is just like the shell of something, like an infinitesimally thin layer on the outside of something. Because for rendering and for game engines, all we really need to do is like know what the outside of something looks like. If I'm looking at a character in a game, I don't need to know what's inside their hand. I just need to know what the hand shape is so I can render it. So this model now has a shell, but there may be cases where I did want to like see inside something, like if something is has a hollow portion, or think about like if I was modeling a ship and I wanted an interior to the ship, I would want to create like the interior hull. So that model is going to have like an outside, but I also want to render what the inside of it looks like. All of this is to get to the point that there's a term for what direction a face of an object is pointing. So what portion of this object is looking outward and what portion of the object is like the inside of it? Like if I scroll here, now I'm like inside my sword, right? Sometimes I hit the Unreal Engine keybind. So like I'm inside the handle right now, right? Each of these faces is one-sided though. And you'll actually notice this more in your game engine because your game engine is only going to render one side of something. And this is actually for like performance reasons. You don't want to render the inside of something necessarily. So there's a term for what direction a face is out, and that's called the normal of that face. And we can see now the newer version of Blender changed this, but we can see the face orientation. If you're using an older version of Blender, this is gonna look real weird. Oh, it does. So blue means this is the outside face. This is the rendered face of this object. Red is the inside or the non-rendered. So if this is where my camera is in Unreal Engine, none of the red is going to be rendered. You can flip a face by hitting Alt-N and then saying flip. And now notice like this part of my sword is red, which means no good. So I'm bringing this up early because as we build models, one of the things we always want to check, like literally it's on the checklist of things I look for before I send something out of Blender, is are all my normals facing in the right direction? I'll give you an example. Let's grab these four and inset them, and let's extrude. And now we have like this hollow point at the tip of our sword, right? And I would want to be able to like render that the tip of this sword is hollow. But sometimes like when we're working in Blender will make these weird assumptions that like, oh, I thought that you wanted this like this, and that's not what we want. So we always want to check our normals. I don't want any of that. So I'm just going to hit Control Z a bunch of times. All right. And that's normals. All right. So we talked about how to do some basic modeling in this lesson. Let's move on to lesson 4. And for this, we're going to make a new model. So I do want to save this again. I'm going to go New, General. And we want to talk about this modifiers panel here. So with my cube selected, I can look and we can see that there's all these different modifiers. Now we're not going to cover all the modifiers. There's a lot. I'll show you. Add modifier. And they've organized these now, which means sometimes you don't know where they're used to just open this huge menu. And now they're like, no, these are edit, these are generate, which means sometimes you don't know where it is. Most of the ones we're going to be using are generate. I don't think we'll use these till later, the deform ones, but we won't use physics at all. We might use this. But for the most part, we're going to be using the generated ones. So I'm going to show a couple of them that I really like that are really fun. The first one is the array modifier. So in generate array, and now this is like creating two of these cubes, right? And I can make 3, 4, I can make a lot, right? So this is going to create a repeated array of an object. And we can have it repeat in each of the 3 axes. So we can do 0 here and 1 on y instead, 1.1. And there's that. This is another reason why it's important that your scale is set to 1, because it's going to use these as the scale. So if your scale wasn't 1, or the scales here aren't right, these aren't going to be right. We can also do multiples, so we can do like 1.1 here, and now it's like a little staircase. Hello, Zabraz. Welcome to this Blender stream. We're learning Blender. Well, I'm teaching Blender, but you can learn. Or you can give me critiques on all the things I'm not doing correctly. It's up to you. All right, so let's get rid of array. Let's try another one. Let's try the bevel. So generate bevel. And notice this one is taking all of the edges and it's like rounding them out a little bit, right? So let's look at, we can change the amount of our bevel. So we can make it like very beveled or like tiny amount of bevel. We can change how much bevel there is. So we can do like a very, very beveled object. Like these are super rounded, right? Just realize every time you do that, notice we're creating like a lot of geometry. So unless this like really needs to be rounded, probably 2 is fine, because let's look, when I do auto smooth, maybe 3, we can get the same look. This is how it would be rendered in Unreal Engine or Unity or Godot, because it's doing the math to like figure out how to round these. So we get like the same-ish level of detail from 8. It doesn't get that much better than 3, right? There are some other settings here. You can change like how does it bevel. Like this will work. Let's do this. I'm gonna create some additional geometry to show how some of these other things work. So like this one changes. Notice how these points are now beveled. If I use arc, it's using like an arced bevel or sharp or patch, right? For these things, like I tend to think arc looks the way you would think it would. There's also like grid fill, cutoff. This is an important one. Clamp overlap, sorry. Let's show a reason why this is important. Let's say that this was like this. Clamp overlap is basically going to make it so that, how do I explain this? It's going to take the existing geometry and it's going to basically cap it so that I can't make it more beveled. Like notice if I go to 0.05, let's go up to, there's a point like around 0.15 maybe where it doesn't get any more beveled. It's basically saying, based upon the geometry of your object, I can't bevel any more than is already there. If I turn this off, it looks like absolute trash, right? Because I no longer have that protection, so it's just going to keep beveling until the model starts to turn inside out, right? And it actually, yeah, it does actually happen around like 0.2, 0.15 maybe. One, I mean, you're almost always going to want this on, but one benefit of turning it off, at least while you're modeling, is it does kind of like tell you where your issues are. So notice down here, these ones are fine. But up here it starts to get weird, which means up here is where the issues of my bevel are. So I could use that to like figure out how big this would need to be to make that amount of bevel to work. Same with this one. It's still kind of not right. But yeah, you get the point, I hope. This is a good point because I forgot to bring this up earlier. I'm going to do something. Let's do 3. I want to scale this face, okay? And I'm going to show you 2 things. I'm going to bring the mouse really, really close, and I'm going to scale. And notice, just by like I'm barely moving my mouse, and it's scaling very quickly. And then I'm going to move my mouse like over here, and I'm going to scale. And the same amount of movement, I'm scaling a lot less. So with scale and rotate, rotates the same. The intensity of those tools is affected by how close your mouse is to the shape. So notice if I hit R, I'm barely moving my mouse. I'm making like a pretty drastic rotation. But if I move it over here and I move the mouse the same amount, notice how it's a lot less. So if you're wondering like, why is it scaling or why is it rotating so differently? The distance of your mouse from something affects it. And it's counterintuitive because like in my mind, I would always think the closer it is, the more like precise it should be. And out here, it should be like a big lever, right? But it's the opposite. So that's that. All right. Let's do our next modifier. Boolean. All right. Let's delete all this crap. I want just a cube again. I guess that's a ways away. All right. Let's just do it the easy way. Add a new cube. All right. And for this one, I'm going to add a duplicate. So I'm going to hit Shift D, and I can add another cube. I'm going to make this one a little bit smaller. I'm going to put it like slightly inside. So the Boolean, we can add a Boolean, and then we can select another object, and I'll hide that one. Hide is H to turn it off, the rendering. And now notice that like I have this point of my shape that's like cut out. And if I move this around, that changes. So Boolean can be used to like remove geometries from something based on the geometry of something else. I actually love the Boolean tool, and there's a thing, let's see. Maybe it's an extension. Oh, did they just delete it? Maybe, oh, maybe because I have it enabled. Anyway. there's a thing called bool tools, I think. So right now I have no Boolean. If I select one object and then another object, notice they're different colors. This is another quick point. And their colors coincide up here. The one that's like more reddish is the secondary object, and the one that's more orangish or like yellowy is always the primary object. So it's basically saying, like, in the hierarchy of selecting something, like whatever one is orange means like that's the one I'm focused on, and everything else is like extra. This comes in common. It comes in. It's pretty relevant. I don't know what words I'm trying to say. So I can hit Alt minus Shift. Nope. All right. What is it? Alt minus. It is an extension, but maybe it got removed. Allow internet access. Bool tool. It's Booltron. Bool tool. I'm gonna install this. Yeah, now it should work. Yes. All right. I love this. This is really cool for like hard surface modeling. If I'm making like sci-fi box or something, you can do a lot of modeling procedurally using Booleans, and then you can like very quickly change your mesh. So like, let's just show really quickly. Scale Y. And then I'm going to add a modifier of an array of 1.2. Let's do 1.3. Now I can select this one and then this one. The yellow one is my primary, and then I can hit Control minus. And now look at this. I have, well, first of all, the Bool tool automatically like hides the mess, so it's not being rendered. And now I've like created these like fins, and I can move this mesh, and it's going to change like where those fins are. So like I said, Boolean tool is really cool. This is using like two modifiers. So I used one to create an array and another one to create the Boolean. So a lot of really cool stuff you can do with modifiers. Delete that, back to normal. No modifiers. Mirror. This one's super useful. Let's cut this cube in half, and I'm going to delete half of it. All right. If you ever want something that's perfectly symmetrical, I highly recommend you just use the mirror, because you'll do half the work. All right, so let's grab this face. We're going to inset it, extrude it, extrude it, extrude it. All right, we're just making some wonky space. So now I can add a modifier, and I can add the mirror modifier, and it's going to create a mirror on whatever axis I have selected. So I can also like do Z and X, right? Now the cool thing about this is if I change this, it's going to change the mirror version of it as well. So I can also, let's cut off the bottom half of this. And then I can do Z, and now look, I can make changes to one portion of the geometry, and it's just going to create like mirrored versions of that. So mirror is really cool for like creating symmetrical objects very quickly. What's my next one? Oh gosh, let's just delete this. Another cube. Solidify. Let's not do a cube. Let's do a plane. So let's say I want to make a shield, but I don't have to like model how the shield bends. What I can do is I can create a plane. I can like move these to, let's delete half of it again, because it's going to be symmetrical. I can move these two down. Move these two down a little. And now I kind of have like, I mean, it's a terrible shield, but right? I kind of have like the shape of a shield, but it's just a plane, which means there's no actual depth to it, right? So I can add a solidify modifier, and now notice like there's a little tiny bit of thickness, and I can change how thick it is with just one little dial, right? And I could also change where the thickness is generated from. So does it generate outward or inward by using this offset of -1 or 1? And now notice that like this shield that we made is only 6 points. And we're making it all procedurally. So these modifiers are really cool for procedural generation. And there's one more I want to show. Let's say the shield is more like organic. It's not metal or something. It's more like a piece of modeled clay. I don't know. I can add a subdivision surface. And what it's going to do is it's going to try to round out all of the corners. Similar to how the bevel does, but actually much more. It's going to add like a ton more geometry. Basically every single point it's going to try to add more. So let's add. And now notice this is kind of more organic looking. Almost like fiberglass or something, right? Like something that went through a mold, I guess. Now, be aware that all of these are adding geometry. So if I go to my statistics, it's telling me now that this has 73,000 vertices, which is a lot. So we can tone this down, and it's going to tell us like, all right, now it's only 290, right? And maybe that's just cool. And maybe for my game, the shield can have 290 vertices, right? But the actual geometry of my model is only 6. So I can just like, I only have a few points to work with, and everything else is being done just all procedurally. So the point of this is just to show you like these modifiers are really cool. But if you export it, just be aware of what the load you're actually creating. Like this is 290 vertices when I export it, which arguably maybe is no longer low poly. All right. Let's finish up this lesson. I was hoping to get to lesson 5, but I think we'll stop at the end of this lesson. So this lesson, we're going to, the exercise is to make a coin. So I'm going to create a cylinder because coins are kind of cylinders, right? I'm going to scale it on the Z to where it's like pretty thin. That's not what I wanted at all. All right. Again, this is in the document that you can get on my Patreon. If you want to buy the document and help support the channel, you can get it for $10. It goes through pretty much everything we've done step by step. If you honestly can't afford the $10, I would rather you have the document than not. So just DM me on Discord and I'll just give it to you. I'm not here to try to like make people poor by paying for a document I made. All right, so I have this cylinder. This is a good point to start for my mesh. The first thing I'm going to do is delete half of it, and I want to create a mirror modifier so that whatever I do on one side is on the other side. And I want to mirror it on the z-axis. So notice like the bottom half of my coin is procedurally generated at this point. Now coins, for the most part, have like some type of ridge around the edge. So I'm going to select this face. I'm going to hit I to inset. You make like a little ridge around the edge. And then I'm going to hit E to extrude and move that down a little bit. So now I have like a little ridge around the edge of my coin. And notice it's automatically on the bottom because we're using that mirror modifier. All right, now let's add a bevel, generate bevel, and the bevel is looking a little weird. And there's two reasons for that. Like I can actually show you. First of all, it's not really beveling. If I go to 1 or 2, it's not that big of a difference. So remember, my bevel is restricted by the geometry of my mesh. So we can only bevel until 2 points start to hit each other, right? But it's also being caused by something else. And that's because we changed the scale on Z, but the bevel is using this scale to figure out what the actual scale is. So what I can do is I can hit Control A and apply my scale, and now look, my bevel looks a lot better. So if you ever get like some weird behavior on your bevels, you probably just need to apply your scale. Let's set to auto smooth. All right, that looks all right. Try to go up a little bit higher. It's I think 2 is fine. You could even go with 1 if you just want like a hard bevel. I'll go with 2. And I'm also going to do one other thing. So I'm noticing like some weird shading specifically around the rim. One of the things I can do is up here I'm in this solid view, I can go to matte cap and then select this. And then this gives me like this light so I could see like what type of surfaces I'm making. I'm trying to get the light to reflect in the right way so you guys can see it. But one of the things I want to do is I want it to consider this edge here a flat surface. And right now the shading isn't really doing that. So I can click this harden normals. And now what it's done is it's saying any surfaces that are like kind of on the same plane, we're going to consider them on a shading perspective all on the same plane. So we have the basics of our coin here, but I want to show one more modifier for this, and we're going to do the Boolean modifier, but I'm going to show an additional tool that we can use for this. I want to have like a symbol on my coin. So I'm going to click text and I'm going to tab to alter my text. I'm going to use the $sign because I'm an American. And then I'm going to center this, so G to move it, scale it up a little bit. If you're European, you can use a euro, or you can just use a random symbol. Like, what are some of the alt codes? How do alt codes not work? Anyway. All right. Now for this, I want it to be like, I want to bring it up a little bit. All right, so it's just below the surface. And I'm going to add a modifier to this text to solidify it. So now I have this solid-ish $sign. And I'll do click this to have them both. And I'm going to use my bool tool add-on. So remember I said alt minus can do like a subtractive. Alt plus, or sorry, what is it? Nope. What did I just do? All right, crazy. I'll just add it. Modifier, Boolean, and the object is the text. Oh, we can't do that, that's why. We need to make this, so this is a text, it's not technically a mesh. So what we do is right click, oh no, I think it's over here, text. Convert to mesh. So now it's a mesh. So now I can use my bool tool. And what I want to do is I want to do union. And so what I'm doing is I'm adding the geometry of this dollar sign to my mesh. Notice that the dollar sign is completely hidden right now, but I still see it here. So the dollar sign, even though it's a separate mesh, is considered part of my coin now. And I can move my dollar sign around in there, and it's still part of this mesh. So this brings me up to like the last point of this, which is the modifier stack. So notice now this coin has multiple modifiers on it, right? But they're all like, this is called the modifier stack, and it's going to apply them in the order of top to bottom. This isn't always relevant, but it is sometimes relevant. And I'll show you the reason why. A really good example is, notice everything else is like kind of rounded, but my dollar sign is very not rounded. It's because we're applying the mirror and then the bevel and then the Boolean. So the bevel is happening before this Boolean happens. So if I just click this and drag it above the bevel, notice how now it's beveled like the rest of the mesh. We are getting some weird behavior from our text mesh though. And if we tab into it, we can see this is one of the flaws of using the text tool, is when you generate a mesh, it generates these like really ugly meshes, especially something like a dollar sign that has like pretty complex geometry to it. It's just creating a bunch of these like really weird triangles, right? And then also if we get our face orientation on, oh, our whole mesh is inside out. Let's fix that. Flip. Yeah, notice how like there's these weird areas where we can kind of like see red. It's because it's just creating this like really bad geometry, right? So this isn't something I would put in a game ever. The point of this is mainly just to show how these modifiers work and how you can do a lot of really cool like procedural stuff. And using the modifier stack, we can change the order in which these are applied. A good example would be, let's add I'm trying to think of a way we could show, well, I guess that was a good example, right? If I move my mirror below my bevel, nothing really changed because these all can still happen in that order, right? It doesn't need to mirror before we bevel. It doesn't need to, oh, this is a good one. If we mirror before the Boolean, the dollar is only on one side of the coin. If we move the mirror after the Boolean, now the dollar shows up on both sides of the coin, but mirrored. So it's backwards on this side, right? Decimate planar. Let's try that. I think it's in Decimate. Planar. Yeah, it looks a lot better. Thanks. Good tip. So yeah, and the last thing about modifiers is you need to apply them before you export your model. Now, when you export it, there is an export setting. It says like auto apply modifiers or something like that. Maybe it's just part of it now. But you may get your model into your game engine and then realize it looks completely different. So I always recommend, first of all, we would save. Stop coin.blend. Always save before you make a big decision because you may run out of Alt-Zs. There's some things that can't be Alt-Z. So to apply modifiers, you can just do this little drop down and then apply. There's also, I think, Control Shift A, Control A maybe. Maybe it was an old thing that we don't have anymore. But you would apply your modifiers. So notice now, my coin still just has this geometry, right? But if I start to apply all these, notice now that dollar sign is now part of the geometry of my mesh. And then if I apply the modifier, the mirror, now the bottom half is part of my mesh. If I apply the bevel, now all those bevels are part of my mesh. And then this one, whatever. So the point being, you really want to try to test this stuff before you export it, because I think, to your point, Zen, look now how this is just like one big face, which means if we export this to Unreal Engine, it's probably not a big deal. But if we were going to try to like model this to be like bendy coin or something, I don't know, we don't want Unreal Engine to try to solve how to make this into triangles. We want to create some quads so we can control the narrative. Also, this is like one big piece, so you probably want to like connect the edge over here to some more points. This is one big piece. These are like one plane. So, points for another day. All right, so we got through 4 lessons. Not terrible. The next lesson would be shading. So how do we make things, like so far everything's just, if we go to our rendered view, everything's just gray and boring. We can make this look pretty, prettier at least, and we can add some shading to this. You may want to do this in your game engine by creating like materials in your game engine, but you can actually create some basic materials in Blender and have those move to Unreal Engine and Unity or whatever. Yeah. Unreal Engine, it will auto figure out how to make this n-gon into triangles, but sometimes it does not do it the way you want it to. And sometimes I've noticed, I don't know what caused this, it'll just say, I don't know what this is, so I'm not going to render it at all. And it'll just delete it from your mesh. So this is why like n-gons are not great for game development, but they're also not the end of the world. I can show you a quick trick before we finish up though. F3 brings up a like search menu, And what we can do is we can type try for triangulate faces, and it will automatically triangulate that face. And then we can do try again and do tries to quads, and it will, not great, but it will make quads as much as possible. And then we could just go in and do the work of like cleaning some of these up. So we do that again down here. Triangulate faces, tries to quads, and it gets rid of like some of the wonky geometry, right? Triangulate faces, tries to quads. So it does some of the work. Like this is one big quad, right? That makes sense. This one, this one. When it gets like down here, it's kind of getting a little ugly. Anytime where you have like one point like this that's creating like a fan of triangles, that's going to look really ugly. Like here too, we have just like a fan of triangles. So we would probably want to like figure out a way to clean this up. But not for today. Use knife or join. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So like all of these, we could get rid of all these and just draw them in by hand. The join being like, I think we used it earlier, but I could click these 2 points and hit J, and it's going to draw a line between those. So now that's triangulated. That type of stuff. Like this one is a good example. Like from here to here, and then I don't need this one. So I could hit X to delete, and I could dissolve edge, and now I have a quad there. Quad, quad, quad. This one, let's see how it did this weird stuff. Like really it should connect this one to this one. And then I don't need this one. So it should probably do that as much as possible all the way down. But anyway. All right, so next time we'll talk about shading. Lesson 6 is UV mapping. Lesson 7 is PBR shading, which is a different type of shading you probably are more familiar with if you've used like textures in Unreal Engine. Lesson 8 is texture painting, which I still need to put some work into. Lesson 9 is exporting. And then 10 is like a review. So hopefully we can get through the rest of it in the next stream. I'll put some information on my Discord and on YouTube on when the next stream will be. If you're interested in supporting the channel, I've been going through this document for this course. It's currently 51 pages. Basically, I'm going through it step by step. So if you like to have like a written resource, one of the things I struggled with when I was starting to learn is like, you'll try to remember where something was, but you're like, what video was that in? And then where was it in the video? So you're like scrolling through the video. And I think with AI, you could do that now. But this is like a written resource. You could just like very control F it, right? So if you want to support the channel, it's for sale on my Patreon for $10. If you don't have $10, I still would like you to go through the course. So just DM me on Discord and I'll give it to you for free, honestly. But that's pretty much all the time I have for today. And please like and subscribe the channel. There's also Twitch if you prefer there. And then join the Discord. There's a QR code. Also, you can find the link like a million places, but it's on my YouTube. Yeah. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you in the next stream.